Good afternoon and welcome to Good Journeys Tarot. So glad that you could be here, even if you're checking this out in the playback. We are here for 78 cards in 78 weeks, where I talk about the card that I'm currently studying and creating on my journey of making a deck. Today's card is the King of Swords, which we will get to in just a moment. So, as I always do, I want to share a little bit about what's been happening here. And one of those things is, as I've mentioned several times, is that I wrote an article for the summer edition of the Cartomancer that is now available as an e-zine, currently $6.99. So you can grab it for much less than it was previously available in print. And I have put the link in the chat for those who are here. Very excited to have completed that project. Another thing that has happened is that I've gotten a new tarot deck. I've not been getting very many decks recently, but this deck kind of spoke to me because it is black and white, and I haven't been able to find a really great black and white deck yet. There are some that I work with, but they're not ideal. Either they're too big or they're just a clone of the Smith Way, or something else is wrong, right? And so I found the Tarot of the Toiling Hands. It's by Esme Baker Tattoo over on Instagram. They created this deck during their isolation during the pandemic, and it is a tattoo style artwork, and so it's very pretty. We're going to see one of the cards in just a moment. That's actually the Ace of Cups on the back of the box, and it is again called the Esme Baker Tattoo, the Tarot of the Toiling Hands. And she did send me a sticker, which is actually the Knight of Cups. And as you'll see there, that she has played with some of the gender representation in the deck to give it a more inclusive feel. It has many people of various ethnicities in it as well. I will probably do a walkthrough of it at some point, though right now I'm just excited to be working with it. So let's take a moment now and look at some cards in my collection that I wanted to talk about related to the King of Swords. We'll start with the Tarot of the Toiling Hands. I will say that this card stock is very thick and stiff, so it's very hard to shuffle. However, I do just love the images. She also has put titles on the cards. They're not the traditional Golden Dawn titles. I don't know if she made them herself or if she found them somewhere. And there's not really a lot of information as far as her artistic choices available at this time, but they are just gorgeous. So that is the new deck that I've gotten. Many decks will incorporate a man with a sword or being surrounded by clouds, and such as, I'm really stumbling over my words this weekend. It's a good thing we don't have a crowd. This is the Robin Wood Tarot. Here's the Good Karma Tarot. They do a similar thing. Very handsome guy. There are tattoos there that depict things relevant to the card as well. And then there's a whole string of cards that have people with things related to air, which is the Suit of Swords. And we have, for example, the Light Seers. I mean, there's every type of flying beast in this card, and it's very cool. There are some decks which will play with the gender, and so this case, the king is actually not specifically male. You'll see some birds there representing the air suit. There's uh, this little bit of a more intense feeling to this card. It does have some false influence, and it's also a darker deck in its imagery. This is the Lost Hollow Tarot. And then we have some that kind of just veer off and do their own thing. Um, we have here the Lightworkers deck, which features a man holding a Lady Justice statue. Very basic, but an idea that comes up a lot when you read about these cards, in that the Justice card is related to the king, just as is related to the king, to the queen. In my mind, I see them as two different sides of justice. One as the more level-headed justice, and the other being a little bit more dramatic, so to speak, a little more intense in our queen, which we'll talk about at another time. This card from the this Modern Love Tarot actually depicts someone presumably working, a professional, outside of a building holding a clipboard. There's a bird on the clipboard. If it were not for the title, I wouldn't necessarily know this was the King of Swords, but I do like the idea of putting it in a more modern setting, a person who uses their mind in their profession. An interesting thing that the Santa Morte did was, is in the face of this king is the spade, which is actually the cartomantic suit associated with swords. And I do love this. I was hoping that they did this with all of the kings, but they did not. But I thought that was a really interesting idea of incorporating the cartomantic symbols there. One of my favorite depictions is actually the This Might Hurt Tarot. The idea here being that a leader who leads with their mind is not necessarily limited by their ability physically, because they have the experience and the knowledge and the head on their shoulders to accomplish things, right? And that inclusion of various ability is one of the things that makes that deck so wonderful. Now, there are a lot of decks where they attempt to either rename the suit or they rename the card from king to something more neutral, or that type of thing. Some examples would be the Elders in the Spacious Tarot, the Boss in the Hip Chick Tarot. I'm stumbling over my words so much. And I love how on the kings or bosses in her deck, she put these little pins. And this one actually says can do. And you'll see the light bulb and the spark of knowledge there on that card. And then you have the Mystic. And in this case, swords has been swapped out for bells. And so another representation in our King of Swords cards of various abilities. And I like the idea of bells in theory, but in practice, I really haven't gelled with it quite as much as I think I should be able to, right? There's something about it that just doesn't click for me with the cards. Now, one of my favorite King of Swords has always been the RWS. I love this card. When I colored it, I thought it needed more yellow to symbolize the air. I just didn't feel like the clouds were enough. Although, in hindsight, I probably should have left it alone. I have always loved this image. I think because of the butterflies on the throne, and most people look at this and see someone who is very stern. And to me, when I look at it, I see someone very relaxed. Like the sword's not pointed up or out; it's just kind of, to me, kind of leaning on his shoulder. So it's like there, like he has it if he needs it, but he's really going to consider things carefully before acting on it, right? And so I do just love this image. And I think that making his clothing yellow kind of took away from the calmness that I see in this, that I really love in this. Thank you, Ange, for popping in. Strength reverses here. I showed the Robin Wood earlier. The Queen of Swords in that deck is one of my favorite Queen of Swords. So when we get to that card, we'll definitely share it. And then in the Marseille, I wanted to show this because of something that Benabel Wynn pointed out. And I hadn't really thought about it, but I had noticed it before. This is the only king that has this type of ornamentation on their shoulders where it looks like they have three heads now. So this is a person who can see things from all directions and take in all of the knowledge before making their decisions as a leader, right? They're not just focused on what's in front of them, but they also see what's coming at them from the sides or the back. They have all of the knowledge available to them, so to speak, in that Marseille image. So this card is in the Golden Dawn, titled the Lord of the Winds and Breezes, or the King of the Spirit of Air. So, and this is the case with most of the kings in the tarot. They titled it as basically the Lord or the King of their element. And as I was studying for the other court cards, there was this one little issue that came up, and I've decided to kind of ignore it because I don't want to get too bogged down in it. But there are a lot of different variations of the court cards throughout decks, not just in modern times where we try to regender or ungender things, or we try to make them more relevant to today. But also in the past, the very earliest tarot decks actually had 6 courts, something which the Minoan Tarot by Laura Perry adopted from the Visconti Sforza tarot. Some decks have princesses and princes. Some of them have pages, and some of them have knights and kings in the opposite place of the knights and kings, say, in the Smith Waite. And so there isn't a lot of consistency, at least from my perspective, in how those have historically been handled. And there's 2 different schools of thought on the knights and the kings. I actually prefer the way that Waite arranged them, with the king being in Sephra 2 of the Tree of Life, which is associated with fire, and not the elemental fire that we think of in the pagan sense, but Kabbalistically, fire is where the divine starts, right? That's the closest to the highest self or the divine or God, or however you want to define that, which is unknown. And so that's why it's associated with fire versus, say, the knights, which are in Tiferet, in the center of the tree, which is actually considered air, and not simply that idea of elemental air, but that Kabbalistic idea of air, that which balances between fire and water on the Tree of Life. But I won't talk about that a lot, but I will let you know that's where I'm coming from. So I'm looking at the kings as that very top level of the court cards, and the knights as that younger energy. Um, One of the things that also is of a lot of debate when we talk about the kings and the courts in general is what astrological signs are associated with them. Some people will say, well, it's air, so it could be any of the three air suits. Some people assign them specific signs, either fixed, cardinal, or mutable to each. And that differs from book to book that you read. I tend to associate the kings with the fixed signs. So in this case, our King of Swords would be associated with Aquarius. And then our queen with a cardinal sign, which would be Libra. And then our knights with the mutable signs, to me, there's more flexibility with the knights. They are still growing in the elements, so to speak. Whereas the pages, I feel like, could really at any point be any of the signs because they are still learning. And so they might exercise things that are related to each of the other three at any particular time. But that's just my preference based on my limited understanding of astrology and my study of various books for myself. So this card is often associated with people of higher learning and people who are high up in authority in, say, political or military settings because they are considered um, a specialist. They're very logical, they're very knowledgeable, and in their specific area. And so this will typically be a scientist, an arbiter judge, or a diplomat. And I went with the idea of the diplomat because I think it works in every setting, right? The scientist and the diplomat both look at things based on the facts. And the same with an arbiter or judge. They try to reach a conclusion that is going to work with the information that is available to the best ability of everyone. And so it's this idea of leadership through fairness and what is right. This is a highly ethical person who is typically not corruptible. So this would be the politician who is actually representing their people and doing what is best for them versus using their position for fame and fortune as we might tend to see. This is a person who is a strategist, which is why they're often associated with the military. They are brave and courageous. Logic and ethics play a huge part in the King of Swords. And I think the reason that most people view this card as stern is because that they base things on logic. But I have never actually seen this card that way. And when I look at images of it, it looks like someone who is clear-headed and has all their ideas together and can make good decisions based on all of the available knowledge, apart from emotion. And I think that's why a lot of people say it's stern because there is a lack of emotion there to a certain degree. They can be an eloquent communicator. In the reverse, we might see here that this could represent our inner critic. Like we're all our own worst critic, right? You hear me talk about my work all the time here. And in reverse, they could be manipulative. They could be irrational, i.e., not keeping up with the ideas that they had, or right. And maybe they might be brutal or abusive, cruel, or even corrupt. Upright, they're the uncorruptible, ethical person who bases everything on the facts. But in the reverse, they can be completely arbitrary and just do things for the sake of doing them and for their own benefit. Amy said that they can be stern because they do some things out of obligation. And I certainly understand how that might be. In this particular card, there is a note in, I believe it's Rachel Pollack's book, about how this is the only throne that actually goes up into the sky, like out of view of the card, linking this particular king with the divine and the divine rulership. Many have want to equate this with King David, though I've never been a real fan of King David, and as I tend to have a more positive view of this card than others, I probably would not associate them with King David. The idea of the butterflies there on the throne of transformation, transformation through knowledge, through intellect, through ethics, not just transformation for transformation's sake, but transformation that makes sense. One of the reasons I think that I struggle with the courts is because I have never been one to claim to be psychic or to read predictively. I've always said that I read for my own psychological development and personal growth. And so it's hard for me looking at the courts because I tend not to see people, like specific people in my life when I read with them. I tend to see more the type of person, the personality that's there that either I need to embrace or I need to reevaluate. And so, in that respect, I feel like the courts add this aspect to the tarot that can be a bit confusing for me because I don't read them as actual human beings, and perhaps that's something I need to look at and see how that might alter my understanding and reading of the cards. I definitely believe that the courts will be cards that I have to revisit when I finished all of the deck, so that I can look at the kings together and the suits together and make sure that they kind of mesh and that they have a flow to them. So far, I have worked out all 4 of the pages. I'm very happy with the pages, though we haven't drawn them all. I have worked them out, but I've only got the one knight, the one king, and the one queen, and still am a little bit on the fence on those images. But since we're at this point, let's go ahead and look at my image that I created this week. And here it is. I actually had no struggle. Like, I just started putting the image together, and this is what it ended up being. I did not have a bunch of versions like I usually do, or anything like that. I went with the idea of the diplomat, the person who has knowledge of all the things, that tries to reach a decision that is best based on all of the knowledge, so to speak. And I illustrated that by the world map, right? And decided to use the butterfly and the sword as our elemental representation, as like a stamp on the map, so to speak. And this card could change as I begin to look at all of the courts together and decide what they're going to look like. I mean, I think that they will follow the Smith-Waite system of page, king, queen, and knight, as it's been set up in that system. Though I probably will not call them those. I do want to try to make them a little modern. The one thing that I did, which we've seen in some of my my other cards that we did courts, is that trying to put a symbol that designates them as each of the four court cards. So there's a shield on the knights, and there is a letter on the pages, as there often are messengers. And then there's going to be a tiara on the queens, and then crown on the kings, trying to find images that are just completely different, so you'll always know which one is which. But I'm giving them archetype names. I just feel like it feels better to me in a modern deck than to say, okay, here are kings or elders or that type of thing. I like the idea of assigning them archetypes, which is something that we see a lot. One of the things we haven't talked about with this card yet is an idea that comes up in more than one book, and is often how I see it as well. And I can see it in my own card, just thinking about it to myself, is that this person is probably Spock in the in the Star Trek universe. The person who is all about logic and facts and makes decisions outside of emotion, so to speak. So how is your summer going? I can't believe that we are already in July. I feel like this year is both dragging out and going very slowly at the same time, if that is a thing that can actually happen. So I'm shuffling the cards right now. Our deck is getting thinner and thinner that we have left to go through before we finish the deck. And I'm having trouble seeing. Oh, waves and the beach, huh? Are you spending a lot of time in the water, Amy? I actually went swimming for the first time last weekend. It was actually the first time I've spent with people in a while, and was very excited about that and had a lot of fun. And we'll likely do that again. I may even start using my HOA pool, which I haven't been to since 2012, 2011, something like that. Our card for next week: sun and fun between thunderstorms. Yeah, that's one of the things. When I was in Florida for a couple of summers in Panama City Beach, we would always it took us about 2 weeks to realize when it started raining, we shouldn't leave the beach because it was only going to last a couple of minutes. So we would like get these downpours, and then by the time we got packed up to leave the beach, it would be sunny again. So I have our card. And I really hope that someone will join me to talk about this next week. And if you're interested in doing that, please do go out to the Linktree link in the comments below and message me on any of the social media that I'm on to join me. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this and you want to see us finish the deck, so to speak, as we walk through 78 cards in 78 weeks. We're over halfway there, and would love for you to join me live and talk about the next card. And as always, I'll post the live on YouTube this afternoon, so you can go in and set a reminder for yourself anytime this week so you don't miss it next week. Our card is, are you ready? Am I making you wait? It is our 9 of Cups, our wish card, as many people will call it. And so kind of looking forward to seeing what this looks like. It definitely will probably be a very different image from the Smith Waite. This guy has never been my favorite card in this particular deck. I don't know. It just doesn't give me that feeling of joy, wishfulness, happiness that you typically have as meanings for this card. So join me next week either in the chat on YouTube or live talking about this card and some of your favorite images of the wish card. Until next time, everybody, good journeys, and thank you for being here. Oh no, a card in the Robin Wood that Strength Reverse does not like. I am shocked. I am shocked. Now I have to go pull that card out specifically to show it next time. Until next time, everyone, good journeys.